members of the Esoteric Order of Gamers. Welcome to 2022. It's a whole new year for the Esoteric Order of Gamers. In fact, it's a very special year because it's my 10th year in operation. I've been making rules summaries since 2004, but I started the Esoteric Order of Gamers in 2012, in May of 2012 in fact. Anyway, today we're going to have a look at, well, it's the company that started it all for me, really, way back in the day, Games Workshop, and they've sent me something new. This is it, Kill Team. It's the new starter set, and I was very excited to get a message about this, and they said they were going to send me one, and I went, yay, because when this came out originally, it was a larger set, it had more terrain in it, and that was just after I managed to get signed up on the Games Workshop review list, and I missed out on getting a copy, and I was a little bit disappointed. So when I found out I was going to get this one, I went, yay, I can play Kill Team. It's almost the same as the other starter set, except it doesn't have quite as much terrain in it, but then I've got a heap of terrain, so, you know, and you can buy all that terrain separately if you want to. In addition to this starter set, I've also got the Kill Team Octarius book, which is about the Octarius campaign. We'll have a look at that in a moment. But first, let's check out Kill Team Starter Set Skirmish Combat in the 41st Millennium. One thing that struck me straight away when I got this box, well, first it wasn't in shrink wrap, which was quite unusual, but also it's a new type of box, and I presume this is a kind of cheaper box for the starter sets so they can pack more in. But you know, I really like my normal opening boxes. I like a good solid box which I can open from the top. And the reason is because I often put Foamcore inserts in them and I store the miniatures in them. So I keep the original boxes, and these ones are kind of, well, it's not flimsy cardboard, but it's kind of cheap cardboard, and it opens from the side, which I really hate when it opens from the side. It's hard to get to. You've got to put back the tabs like this and then slide it out. Drop the box. See, you can see what happens. It's madness. Cats and dogs living together. It's crazy. And then you've got this kind of flimsy box at the bottom. So I can see they've saved money on this, but I wish they'd just sort of spend a few extra cents per unit and do proper boxes, because, you know, these are just kind of flimsy. Anyway, that's just an initial impression. What's inside is fantastic. We've got a couple of sprues of terrain. Here's this one, which has got this nice chunky kind of orc wasteland terrain. Also good for games of Gorkamorka, the very old game of Gorkamorka, if you've got that one. I've got that lying around somewhere, but I've never played it. And also just general Warhammer 40,000 terrain, so really good stuff. You've got some barricades and things. These look quite similar, kind of similar to the ones you'd have in Necromunda, so you could use those for Necromunda. You could use all of this for Necromunda, of course. You've got these new kind of measuring movement templates. There's been quite a bit of controversy about those, I must admit. This is where they've equated movement distances with squares and circles, etc. But of course it doesn't match. Like 4 inches isn't a four-sided square and 3 inches isn't a triangle. And yeah, so a little extra thing to remember, but we'll get onto that when we get into the rules. Then we've got quite a few sprues. What, if you count this as 2 sprues, that's 4, 5 and a half sprues. And these guys are the same units you got in the original starter set. So you have 22 miniatures, 10 veteran guardsman kill team models, and 10 orc commando kill team models, and also a bomb squig and a commando grot. So there you go, that's what you get. You've got your piece of card that protects things from the miniatures on top. There's a couple of decal sheets, which is nice to see. And here are the core rules, and it's a little book, as you can see. It's not the big one that came in the original set. I'm not sure whether the original set had a hardcover or a soft cover, but you know, this is all you need. Nice and compact, good size, easy to reference. Then we've got the Recruit Edition, and this is all your army lists and things. We'll have a look at those in a moment. And also in here we've got our book for putting our miniatures together. And then finally we've got a paper map. Now again, I don't know if the original starter set had a board or not. I really must check these things out. But in this one you've just got a paper map. You know, and these things are fine to get started on, but if you're any kind of gamer who's into this stuff already, you already have boards or terrain set up, so you won't really need it. That's it. As you can see, just kind of a wasteland. But, you know, that's not too bad. Once you backfold it, that'll lie flat, and it's just a good dirt background for your games to get started with. That's that, and that's about it. So let's have a look at these books and find out what Kill Team is all about. Oh, and by the way, there's a sheet of counters as well. Okay, let's have a quick look through these rule books that you get with the game. Now, this is a recruit edition, they call it, though it's not actually called that on the outside of the box. It's called a starter set, but this is an introduction to Kill Team, this booklet. And it sort of takes you through the rules and tells you all about the basic concepts of Kill Zone. You can see this is all the fancy terrain that came with the original starter set that you can buy separately now, which really fills up this map because it's not a large map. It's only 22 inches by 30 inches. It talks about collecting, of course, gaming, so some background material as well on the factions you get, your Orc Commandos, some pictures of them, and the Death Corps of Krieg, and shows those miniatures there. What you get, your dice, your combat gauges, and here's this system first mentioned. So the triangle equals 1 inch, the circle is 2 inches, the square is 3 inches, and the pentagon is 6 inches. Yeah, so here's your gauge. You've got this one here, and you've got a long one here. So this is your 6-inch one, and this one has got your 1 inch on there, your 2 inch there, and your 3 inch there. So a handy little combat gauge, that's great. The only problem is, of course, is that all the movement distances on the unit cards and throughout the rules are now in terms of these symbols, and you have to do that little bit of quick mental gymnastics to remember that a triangle is 1 and a circle is 2. Now this would be fine if you just thought, okay, I've got to move a circle, so I'll just go the circle on my gauge and I'll move that far. The thing is that you can use this template because you're moving in little straight distances when you move your model. So if I take a model here, I've just primed these already, and I want to move, say, 3 inches, and I want to go 1 inch to a corner, and then 2 inches to another corner. That's all very well, but I've got to remember how to divide the different symbols up and what equals that. I guess it's not too bad when you're looking at the template and you can immediately see that's 1, 2 and 3 inches and this one's 6. Maybe you'll get used to it, but yeah, it seems like an extra level of mental gymnastics, I just think. Anyway, we'll see how it goes in play. It's very hard to tell what it'll be like before actually using it. The symbols are annoying though, because the circle really should have been 1. It's just intuitive. The triangle should have been 3. You could have had a hexagon for 6. I don't know, maybe that was too much like a circle. I just don't feel like there's a whole lot of thinking going behind that. Anyway, that's that. Kill Zone data cards. Now it says you get your data cards, but you don't. They don't actually come as separate cards. They just come in the back of the book. They call these data cards, but they're not cards, of course. And you get some nice tokens as well. There's a sample mission here, so this is your first basic mission, and then it starts going through the basic rules. So this is something you don't often see in Games Workshop games. They sort of lead you through the games, through these different missions. So the first mission is a very basic one, just covering movement and things. Shows you where to lay out the terrain that you get, and then it goes into cover and introduces all the rules. Now I basically just skipped all this because I go straight to the rule book and read the rules. But you know, it's handy if you're a beginner, and this is obviously aimed towards beginners. Next steps, in other words, more stuff you can buy. So, well, you go into the core manual, which you get in the set and everything like that, but then it starts talking about other things you can buy, like Kill Team Octarius, which I have separately, and I'll show you in a moment. And you can buy your kill zones as well, which are different packs of terrain and miniatures. Here are your data cards for the troops. I'll go through these stats in a second. You've got them for the Krieg guys and the commandos. That's it. So, nice little intro book. That's really good. Then we get onto the core rules, which is this nice compact little book here. And I think this is just the same as the large book, they've just scaled it down in size. So the text is pretty small, you want to get your glasses out if necessary, I certainly had to. And we go through it. So data cards, this is where it describes the different stats. So what we have is a movement stat, which is, as I said, in terms of the new system. So in this case, 3 circles. So I can't yet emit it. What is it? The circle's 2 inches, so that's 6. There we go. So it's 3 of these increments, but 6 inches. So you could just say if you move straight ahead, you could use this. Again, a little bit of maths. Very minimal maths, I know, but still, maths all the same. I really don't know what the advantage is from just using a tape measure. And in fact, it says you can just use a tape measure if you want to, so it's up to you. So you've got your movement. Then you've got an action point limit. Every time you activate a model, they call it an operative in this game for some reason, which I just feel is unnecessary nomenclature. Nomenclature? Or is that numbers? I'm not sure. It's an unnecessary extra term. Let's say you could call it a figure or a model. Instead, all the way through the rules, they say operative, which just, again, we already have words for these things, coming up with new words. And the other one, which I'll mention again later, is it's next page, is turning point. Instead of rounds, they say turning points, which is ridiculous because not only is it a new term that no one's ever used before and no one will probably ever use again, but also it sounds like turn, and it's not a turn, it's a round. A round is 2 turns. Your turn and your opponent's turn together make up a round. So very annoying they've decided to call it a turning point. It's just making up stuff for the sake of doing it and trying to be different. And let's face it, it won't stick. Anyway, back to the stats. So you get an action point limit. So you get a certain number of action points every time you activate a model or an operative. Group activation, there may be a number here so you can activate several of them at once. You get a defense value, which is the dice you roll for defense. You've got a save value, you've got a number of wounds. And then on your weapon profiles, attacks, which is the number of dice you roll, your good old ballistic skill, which is a number and above that you have to do to hit. The damage it does, that's broken into normal damage and critical damage, depending whether you do normal or critical hits. Special rules, critical hit rules, stuff like that. Same with melee weapon profiles, it's pretty similar. So there are your stats. So we get into the game sequence here, and as I said, they're called turning points for some stupid reason. Each turning point consists of an initiative phase, a strategy phase, and a firefight phase. In the strategy phase, you ready all your figures by flipping your order tokens up. These are order tokens. There are 2 types. There's a conceal order and a normal one. What's the normal one called? Engage. Conceal and engage. So you flip those up. You determine initiative, which is usually just a roll off. Then you've got your strategy phase where you get a command point each. You get a pool of command points you can use. You can spend those on tactical ploys and strategic ploys, many of which are army dependent or faction dependent. And if you have TAC ops that are revealed during this step, you reveal them. TAC ops are like sub-objectives for winning victory points. So it's kind of a little, it makes things a little bit more interesting because all the way during the game you are revealing these TAC op objectives and trying to achieve them to get points. So it's not just killing the other guy. Firefight phase, this is when you have alternate activations. You will activate an individual model, but if you have group activations, you might activate a few at once. And you apply either one of these conceal orders or engage orders, and that just affects how you are affected by cover. If you've finished activating all your units but your opponent doesn't, you can do an overwatch. So this is a different treatment of overwatch. Usually overwatch is interrupting another player's or another model's activation. In this case, it's something you can do. You can fire with a unit that's already activated if you don't have any more units to activate. So slightly different take on Overwatch, which is kind of weird. We'll see how that works. Then you get your action. So you activate a unit and you spend your action points. Most things are 1 action point and you can just spend it. So Again, action points feels a little bit outdated to me, but it's just one way of doing things. I always feel like it's just, keeping track of action points is another little thing to do with your head. It's easy to just say you can do one move, one attack, or whatever. But anyway, that's just the way this works. You've got normal moves, you've got a charge move, and depending on whether you have engage or conceal orders, some of these you can't do. So you can't obviously charge if you had a conceal order on. Fall back, dash gives you an extra bit of movement, pass if you don't want to do anything, overwatch if your opponents are still activating their figures and you've finished, a pickup items one, and a shoot. So getting onto combat, slightly different and a little bit simpler, which is good. It doesn't have the whole roll to hit, roll to wound, roll to save thing. It's a bit simpler than that. You select a target, you roll your attack dice, you've got to beat your ballistic skill. Your target rolls their defense dice. In both cases, 6 are criticals, and then you resolve the successful saves. So successful defense rolls cancel out hits. If your defense was a critical, you can cancel out a normal hit or a critical hit, or you can use 2 normal saves to cancel out a critical hit. So that's interesting. So after that's done, you resolve the successful hits. So a normal hit inflicts the normal damage of the weapon, and a critical hit inflicts the critical damage, which is slightly higher, obviously. Then you take away wounds, or that kind of thing. Fight is also slightly different, except you both roll at the same time. You select a melee weapon, and you both roll your attack dice. And then something a little bit different, you have to decide whether to parry or to strike with your hits. So if you parry, you can discard one of your opponent's hits. If you had a critical hit, you can discard one of your opponent's hits or critical hits. If you strike, you can inflict damage, either normal or critical. So you can make these decisions based on the number of dice you've got, the number of hits you've got, whether you want to cancel out damage or do damage, which is interesting. It's a slight little meta game there in the combat thing, and it's pretty deadly. So that's good. When you get into close combat, things will be resolved pretty quickly. Wounds and damage, objectives. There's a bit on line of sight. Again, you've got this, whether you're engaged or concealed. Basically, when you're being concealed means that you can hide behind cover and not be shot at. That's basically the difference. If you have an engage action, when you're hiding behind cover, you can still be shot. You get the benefits of cover, which means you get a free defense cancel out. You cancel out one hit, basically, but you can still be shot out. So that allows you, that's really the biggest difference in this game, is this engage and conceal thing, which allows you to make really good use of cover. You can sneak up using cover without being shot at all, or without being targeted. Then there's a bit about kill zones, your terrain and everything, the keywords that are applied to the different bits of terrain. You can have vantage points, so basically if you're on a higher level you can cancel out that advantage from cover. And climbing and dropping and falling and stuff like that. Here's terrain features and the keywords that should be applied to them. And then you've got your ways to play, which is common for all Games Workshop games these days. Open play, which is just go in and do it. Get your models and go for open play. Here's a mission for that. Match play, where you have a roster and you choose particular models for the game that you're going to play. There's a whole sequence on how to do that. You can scout the field beforehand, etc. And then Spec Ops narrative play, which is a sequence of games, like a little mini campaign. And you have Spec Op games. Your characters get particular extra abilities and special abilities as they survive, casualties, you have a base of operations, strategic assets, you can do requisitions, and then you've got these Spec Op missions, so really quite a lot to it if you want to do a campaign, which is interesting. And then you've got a mission pack for Spec Ops, so it gives you a sample of a sequence of missions to do in that kind of narrative campaign, which is interesting. And then finally we have the TAC Ops, which are these, as I said, these secondary objectives which you can try to achieve during the game. So there are your rules, pretty compact. The rules are pretty straightforward, the basic rules, pretty impressive. Of course, it all comes down to how they play on the tabletop. Later on down the track I'll be doing a battle report and showing you how it plays. Next thing I want to show you is, we'll stick with the core set still, and show you what I've done to organise my core set. So I like to, before I do anything, paint up my miniatures and organise the game. So what I've done is this Foamcore insert. This one here is a Foamcore box with a bit of sheet steel, stainless steel on the bottom there, and on the strip on the side for the larger models. And I've already constructed and primed these models and based them as well. And you can see if you've got larger models, they can go on the side like so. And this is a great way of storing things because they won't shake around, because I put rare earth magnets on the bottom like that. I'll give you a closer look at those figures in a moment. Then I've got another tray here where I'll put my templates there, my counters and dice. Just a nice way of keeping everything organised. And then I can pop my books on top like so. My map. There's a bit of space for some extra books if I buy some more. And that's a good way of storing my whole thing. So the next thing we're going to look at is this extra book. This doesn't come with the starter set, and that is the Kill Team Octarius campaign book. Now I looked through this one and I thought, oh, this is a nice thing to have. Not essential if you have the starter set, because one thing it does is just repeat all of the data cards. Where are they? All right, these are exactly the same data cards that you get in the starter set. Now, of course, I'm sure Games Workshop will be releasing a lot of these, hopefully on their own, but also in packs with miniatures and terrain. They will. And so this, again, it's one of these things where they're like sort of army books. I find it a bit frustrating when I buy a new team or a new faction, warband, whatever you want to call it, that I have to buy books separately as well, especially when they're relatively pricey, because I'm not so much into all the background material. So half of this book is background fluff, which, I might read, I might not read. It's not as important to me. It is important to many people. They love all the background material and the background fluff. So that's going to be more important to them. But you will have to get these books, of course, because they will have the data cards. And not only the data cards, they've got a lot of faction-specific information as well. There's equipment and requisitions and extra spec op missions and all that kind of stuff. So it really depends how much you're into your particular faction, how many factions you want to buy, what your budget is for the game. Anyway, so let's have a quick look at Octarius. As you can see, this is all background material, tells you all about the Octarius campaign and the forces involved. Some nice pictures of the miniatures, some names you can give your troops if you want to personalise them, and their background stories if you want to get into that. Then we get into the orcs, same stuff, all background material. As I said, if you enjoy reading that, you will. Some nice pictures, again, names, background. And then we get into the rules section. So page 40, the rules section begins. We've got special TAC Ops objectives for the Veteran Guardsmen and the Commandos. We've got discussion of the Veteran Guardsman kill team. We've got support, strategic ploys, abilities. These are all finely tuned stuff that you'll get into if you enjoy that level of detail. Spec Ops rules if you're running narrative campaigns, requisitions, and then the same again for the Commandos. As I said, these data cards are exactly the same as what you get in the starter set. So you've got the same kind of thing. Kill Zone Octarius, supposedly some special terrain for Octarius, just points out really what is the obvious. This is a vantage point, yeah, we can probably tell that. Scrap pile, some special rules for the scrap pile, scramble over, charge over, so terrain can have special rules as well. And then you've got a mission pack for Octarius, which is a nice sequence of missions and lots of variety for your games, different missions there. So this is the kind of level of detail that if you're into the game, you'll love. If you're just playing some quick games and you don't want this level of detail, you won't need it. But in future, of course, you will need it to get the data cards for the different new forces that come out. But it's a small soft cover book, so it shouldn't be too expensive. Everything's pricey here in New Zealand, unfortunately. But of course, it depends how much you play the game and how much you get invested in a particular faction. So that's that. Finally, let's have a look at the miniatures. As I said, I've built them and based them and primed them and magnetized them. I haven't painted them yet. That will be for the future. But we can have a good look at the figures as they exist now, and they're very nice. First up, we've got this nice selection of terrain. You can see there's also our templates there. We've got 2 of those templates and just 1 of those. I suppose you don't use that one as much because it's a 6-inch one, but it's good to have 2 of those. And as you can see, I've just primed these black before I paint them, but they're very nice, detailed, ramshackle, orcish walls and scrap piles, and also these barricades, which you can use for a little bit of cover. I don't know if this is really enough for a game to cover that 22 by 30 inch area. Certainly this will be pretty scattered terrain with lots of gaps between it if that's all you used. So you probably need some more terrain, and as always with these kind of skirmish games, more terrain is better. Luckily I've got a heap of stuff from earlier games which I can use. For example, here's the building terrain from the first edition of Killzone, which I painted up and will be very useful to use in these games. Doesn't so much go with the orky stuff, but what else can I use for orky stuff? Hold on. Well, this stuff is getting pretty old school. This is from Gorka Morka, which was the old orc game of vehicle combat between orcs. But still good terrain, you know, it's cardboard stuff, but it's still pretty solid. You can definitely use that kind of thing, and it's got a few plastic pieces as well. These are the old Necromunda pieces that used to come with it. So that kind of thing actually goes really well with that kind of scrap stuff. So, you know, raid your collection of scenery items and get a lot of scenery out there, because this being a skirmish game with a lot of use of cover, you want as much scenery as possible. And as I said, Games Workshop will be releasing the rest of this kind of terrain that they released with the original Kill Team 2nd Edition starter set. First up here are our veteran guardsman figures. And a very nice bunch of figures they are too. Very detailed. Now of course there are lots of configurations for building these. There's probably 2 different types for each one of these that you can choose from. And I've just done the ones that I like the most. This one, for example, I wanted a sniper instead of the demolitions expert, so just built it like that. We've also got a medic guy who's got a little suitcase full of drugs there, just a nice touch. As you can see, very nice detailed figures. Now, of course, I've magnetised all these because I have my Foamcore solution. I've used a little bit of putty there and I'm holding the magnet in place. And this allows me to store them nice and easily. I've just used Astro Granite as a textured base there, and then I've just primed them in white, as I always paint from white. So there are our veteran guardsmen. And now we've got our Commando Orcs, Commando with a K. And these are a fantastic selection of characters. Each one has a personality all of its own. Again, you've got lots of variation. This is just how I chose to build mine, but you can do them quite differently with different weapon loadouts. Aren't they amazing? Really big, chunky miniatures with lots of detail. And you've got a bomb squid there and a Commando Grot as well. Very, very nice collection of orcs. And just as an aside, you can see how orcs have grown over the years. This is an original metal Games Workshop Space Orc from the very first range, way back in, I don't know, the 80s was it, when it came out? Very old figure, that one. You can see how much bigger they are these days. That's the main Commando guy. Look at the difference. Oh, and by the way, in case you're wondering, the scenery I won't be storing in the box. I keep all my scenery together in plastic tubs and things, so I don't need a storage solution in the box for the scenery, just the miniatures. So that's a look at Kill Team, the starter set. Now I just looked this up. In New Zealand it's $123, which is pretty good value. I was pleasantly surprised. That's not too bad for the 22 miniatures and the terrain and the rule book, the paper mat, so pretty good value. And I think it's a great way to get started on Kill Team. The original 2nd edition set, because it had all that terrain in there, it was really, really pricey. This is a much better way to get into it. And of course there's lots of expansions if you really get into the game and enjoy it. So I'm looking forward to playing this. As you can see, I'm ready to paint up the miniatures, so in future videos hopefully I'll be showing those off to you and showing you how the game plays. Nothing hugely surprising rules wise, just some simplifications. Very glad to see that the shooting and close combat systems have been simplified. The cover thing looks pretty good, should change the emphasis on cover. The movement thing I think is a little bit of a pain in the neck, but I think it's the kind of thing you'll get very used to using as you use it, or you'll just forget it and go back to using a tape measure. But I think with the actual template on hand, it should be relatively easy to get used to that system. So as I said, no huge conceptual leaps forward, but I think an easier version. Personally, what I would have loved them to see them do is do a Warhammer 40,000 version of Warcry, because I still think Warcry is one of the best things Games Workshop have done in this space for a while. I love the way you could just draw out the cards and they would have the scenery on them. They would have the special abilities on them. You could set it up almost as part of the game. This is a bit more traditional in that respect. It doesn't have that kind of thing. It's got the three versions of play, match play, narrative play, all that kind of thing, which I think is geared towards the fact that Warhammer 40,000 players tend to be a bit more crunchy and like that kind of stuff, which is fair enough. I just really liked Warcry because it was simple and easy to set up a game and fast. But there's not too much horrible crunchiness in this. You can add it if you want to with all the spec ops and tactical ops and tactical ploys and strategic ploys and all that kind of thing. You can add as much detail as you want and play a big narrative campaign where your characters develop and have names and get wounds and special equipment and the whole thing. So as always with Games Workshop games, you can go in at a very simple level or a very complex level if you prefer. Thank you very much first to Games Workshop for sending me Kill Team and the Octarius book so I could show it to you. And thank you very much for watching. We're kicking off another year here at the Esoteric Order of Gamers. I hope you'll enjoy the stuff that is coming out. As always, I'm making rules summaries and they're coming out on my site at orderofgamers.com. Go check out that website. All the content I've done for almost 10 years is there. It's searchable and easy to find. There's so much stuff there. You could spend months watching all the videos and, of course, downloading the rule summaries for use with your board games and tabletop games. I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit the all notifications button. Bye for now. Good gaming.